you know Ernest Herzog, the documentary filmmaker and fiction. You know, he always says the same thing, and I followed his advice in a way because he's an old, ancient, wise man. He always says, if you have an idea, just tell it. Don't wait. Don't wait for the cinema school. Don't wait for what other people think. Just do it. Nowadays, it's with the technology, it's actually easier to tell stories. So trial and error. Tell it as you can, and learn from that. Learn from your mistakes. Learn from your experiences, and carry on, which is what I've always done. This is the proper time, the first time in Romania, in Bucharest. And I'm very happy to be here because I have a lot of appreciation for Romanian cinema and the love of cinema in this country. In Madrid, one of the jobs that I have is subtitling movies from English to Spanish.
Do you do subtitles right now? Because I know that in Spain there is the voiceover.
Usually, yeah. You have voiceover, like all the big countries, populous countries in Europe, like France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, they always dub the films. But in a big city like Madrid, you have a big market, a big niche of a market where people watch the films in the original language and with subtitles. And the place that I work for is the Filmoteca, which is like the national film house. And everything there is subtitled. So every year there's a Romanian festival, non-competitive festival, organized by the Romanian consulate, and they choose the best movies of the year and they just show them throughout the week. And I've translated many of those films, so I'm familiar with like the new wave of Romanian cinema, and I really like it. I mean, I really think that it's the quality, it's impressive,
I actually received press releases from there, from the Romanian Cultural Institute in Madrid, and I actually know about this week. Yes.
Oh yeah?
Yes, but I did not know they were subtitled.
Yeah, they're always subtitled in English.
Yes,
from Romanian to English.
They're produced like that.
Yeah, and they come in DCPs, right? But they always need not always, but sometimes they do the subtitles here, but a lot of times they need the subtitles done in Madrid, and that's where I come in.
I can tell that you lived for a long time in London, or in the UK.
I did, but I mean, the reason why I speak English is not really because of that. It's just my dad used to work for the airline company, the national airline company of Spain, Iberia. And when I was 10 years old, the whole family went to live abroad. In this case, it was Egypt. That's where I grew up, in Cairo. And I went to an English school there. And then after Cairo, I went to Ecuador. He was moved to Ecuador, so the family went to Ecuador. That's where I did high school. I was an American school there. And then to study the actual university, I went to Scotland.
Sorry.
But then I lived 1 year in London.
Okay. And how did you discover your passion for cinema?
Well, it was right about that time after I finished. I mean, I was a product of my times in terms of studying. I should have perhaps gone for the fine arts, angle. But instead I chose economics, business studies, which is what I ended up studying and ended up finishing the degree. But soon after that, I realized that it wasn't really for me. Well, I knew that while I was studying, but I wanted to finish the degree anyway. And after that, I just got myself a camera and started experimenting with it. And it's been like that ever since.
Did some artists inspire you to go on this path?
Did some artists inspire me to actually go this way? Well,
Some certain film, why not?
I mean, I had a lot of inspiration for good cinema. I remember when I was in university watching some Channel 4 film. It was Cassavetes, the director, the New York director, and I think it was Faces, you know. And I really liked that freshness of that. It looked like reality, but it wasn't. It was like all fiction, but the way that he was filming it. In any case, what I ended up going for was more the documentary style of filming. It's not that I say no to fiction, but for me, documentary is a way, and a certain type of documentary is what sort of portrays the reality also in a if you do the direct cinema sort of style in a fictional way, which is what I like.
But do you have an inspiration for certain stories? Did you have back when you started?
Well, no, when I started, I was just like practicing with my camera, just filming whatever. I was in London and I was filming Hyde Park, the people in the Hyde Park corner, the preachers, you know, and I was doing little shorts like that, experimental shorts. And then I traveled in the States. I remember I taped a really hardcore anti-immigrant radio show on a tape. And then I did a trip across the country, and I mixed those images that I filmed in Arizona with the Navajo Indians with this radio program, which is really quite...
You are not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to do that?
No. Were you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to take a radio show and mix it?
I mixed it. It's in YouTube. You can still see it. I mix the sound. It just goes on and off. Still there. This is a very old video. So I started doing that sort of stuff. And then, I mean, the stories that I've followed so far with the 3 features have been sort of, you could say, social, you know, in terms, or political. A neighborhood changing. That was the first one. The neighborhood where I live in the center of Madrid. The second one was about Indian immigrants that come to Spain but are stuck in one of the cities that Spain has in Morocco, which is a Spanish city, and they're surrounded by walls. Now those immigrants were stuck there for a long time, so they went off to the hills to protest, and they wanted to be sent to the mainland, not deported. Anyway, we filmed all that process, and we also filmed their families in India, which they hadn't seen for a while. So you could say the themes are always social. This last film that we did is about something which is, evictions in Spain, which is our very recent past. The film that's showing here, it's not evictions by banks, which was massive in Spain, but actually evictions by the public authorities, by the Council of Madrid, that is evicting low-income families because it's selling houses, like blocks of flats, publicly owned, to foreign investment funds during a time of crisis.
Is that legal? Can you just...
Yeah, exactly. Do you think, is that legal? Everyone would think that it isn't, but they actually did it. They did it. It's being contested in court. So there's still a chance that those flats are given back to the council. And I know that Pedro Sanchez, which is the new president that's in power now, has been shortly in power, one of the first measures that he did was to sign a law that prohibits any future sale of public housing in the country, just to make sure.
This subject sounds a lot like a journalistic one. Were you also involved into journalism investigations?
Journalism, because it's like a current theme, perhaps. I mean, we were surrounded by journalists, photographers, and other types of journalists, because the evictions were being followed by the media a lot at the time, both national and international. But our perspective was not a journalist perspective. We were more into, let's wait and see what happens. So get close to the characters and let them act out in front of the camera without asking them any questions, without leading them on, but just like a fly on the wall approach of to just wait, be patient, and film a lot, get a lot of footage, and then edit it later on when you have sufficient material. And then what you get is a sort of, from the perspective of the characters, that's when it starts looking like fiction. because there are no questions, there is no voiceover, they're acting out their own dialogue, their own script, but it looks in a way from like a fictional style because of the perspective of the camera. They never look at the camera, they're there acting out their own lives. And the sequences are like usually with steady shots, you know, so it looks like it's planned, but it isn't. So they thought we were journalists, the women that we were filming, the families that we were filming, but we were actually cinema makers, you know, movie makers.
And what were their reactions? Yes.
The reaction of the characters?
Yes, when did they see the film?
Yes, when the film, I mean, the film opened in a big festival in
Valladolid.
Yeah, Valladolid, but that was too far for them to go, so they didn't see it there. We had to wait a few months until it opened in Documenta Madrid, which is the documentary festival in Madrid. And there we took, I mean, the whole families came with their kids and everything. So they were very moved to see themselves on the screen. Sometimes they would get angry at seeing what had happened to them. I remember Benny, the husband, he would storm out of the cinema when the judge, there's a sequence where the judge actually tells him that she's going to kick them out. So he couldn't take it, you know, but in general, the reaction was very positive. They liked seeing themselves, and they also liked the questions and answers afterwards and to interact with the public. And in that festival, we won like the jury award for the national film, and also the audience award. And that audience award granted us the possibility of showing the film like 15 more times in Madrid. So they came to a lot of those screenings, and they got more and more used to interacting with the public, because their situation hasn't really changed. In fact, it's gotten worse. I mean, they're still squatting, occupying, you know, seeing what, I mean, their housing situation has not been solved. So they're always on the verge. They're always, you know, walking that fine line. And their life, I mean, the story that we tell is just one little section of their lives, but their lives carries on, and their lives has always been tragic.
It's a very sensitive topic, and I was wondering if there was any difficult scene to shoot.
Any
difficult scene?
I mean, all the scenes were difficult to shoot in a way that you never know what to expect, because you don't give the characters any sort of mise en scène. You don't plan it. You sort of plan this frame, okay, you frame, but you don't know where they're going to move. You just hope that things happen within your frame and everything is okay. But I mean, I suppose the most difficult in this film, the most difficult scene to shoot was the actual eviction, because it was very charged with adrenaline. There was a lot of police. Before the hours before, we doubted that the police were going to come and actually carry out the eviction, but then they actually do. So those hours were actually quite heavy to undertake, and especially after the eviction, when they kick them out and take all their belongings right outside their house. And you see the characters there. I mean, that was just, you know, we actually left. We didn't return until, you know, the next day or 2 days later, when they had decided to place all their belongings right next to the house where they had been evicted, and they remained there for a period of 2-3 weeks, which is what a lot of the movie is about, like the post-eviction, what happens after the eviction. And that was also tough to film, but like them, like the characters, you always, I mean, they have such strength that they leave the past behind, they leave the traumas behind, and they concentrate on the future and see how they can make it, how they can make meets end. In our case, we were just trying to tell the story with what was happening to their present.
I don't know, did you meet any specific character that you got close to, perhaps a kid?
Yeah, well, because the kids are supernatural. I mean, they're extra natural. But I guess I don't have any favorites. I don't have any favorites. I mean, I like them all. It's like what parents, I'm not a parent, but usually parents say that they all love their children the same. Well, it'd be pretty much like a little like that, you know. Each one is strong in a different way. You know, you have Dolores and Isabel, the two women that carry on the fight to preserve their house, and their strength lies in different you know, psychological factors. But you like them because the way they are. You know, I don't really prefer one or the other. You know, I just like the way the whole thing just happened. How Dolores' eviction was stopped, and that led to the story of Isabel being evicted. You know, I like the flow of the story more than, you know, choosing each character independently. You know, but I love the kids, of course. Like they're really natural.
Weren't there any NGOs who offered to help them?
Well, more than NGOs, what you had at the time was a grassroots movement that had erupted because of the Occupy Wall Street movement. There was something very similar happening in Spain, and it's called the 15th of May movement, 2011. After that, they occupied Sol, which is the main square in Madrid, and a lot of squares in Spain. After they stopped occupying the public squares, a lot of the struggle went into the housing issue, because there was a lot of evictions. So that's how we started filming. And that's not really an NGO, because NGOs, which means non-governmental organization, usually get money from the government, precisely, right? This is not an NGO. This is purely grassroots. There was no money involved. This was just people trying to stop evictions and trying to make the government change its politics through collective action, and trying to get the people affected involved in the process. And that's also part of what the film is about. We don't concentrate on the social movement, but you can see that there's a social movement behind. But not an NGO. It's more like a grassroots movement.
Do you think that the documentary can change, not the world, but can have some impact upon our community?
Yes, I mean, documentaries can have an impact, and that impact is a direct result of the quality of the documentary and the success that it has, and also the production behind, and how much of an impact strategy you have, so that you can actually make things change. I couldn't say what impact this documentary, The Divide, has had, because in reality, both our protagonists, both families, are in a dire, bad situation still today. So it hasn't had like a very positive impact on their lives in particular. But it's also true that the documentary may have helped to create a climate in which, when the politics change, when the parties in power change, they are more proclive or more friendly towards changing laws in terms of public housing, and keeping public housing public forever, you know, and never sell them to foreign investment funds again, which is what I was telling you earlier. This law actually happened when the new president went in. I don't know if the documentary had some part in his decision or not, but
was it the only documentary you made?
The only documentary made on this subject?
Yes.
No, I mean, there's been other documentaries made on the eviction issue, like a few. Very different. They even did a musical. Okay, so
Stage musical or not a movie?
it was like a fiction movie musical, okay, but like realistic, but it was a musical after all, and it was about evictions. But usually what they have done is follow the mortgage evictions. So it's a subject that has been touched upon, okay, maybe not in the style that we've done it, you know, like cinema verite, you know, direct cinema, fly on the wall sort of thing. They've done it. They've used different, you know, influences of different styles, but it has been touched upon because it was a huge subject, you know, in what was happening in Spain at the time.
And do you think that for a documentary filmmaker like you, it was important the fact that you traveled a lot when you were young?
That's
Perspectives on subjects in the world?
I mean, I think it helps. I think traveling, in my case, like living abroad, opens up your perspective, makes, because I always went to international schools from people that came from very different backgrounds, from many walks of life. I feel that if you're sensitive, I mean, you can have an open-minded idea. But I can also say that I also know people that grew up in this international context that, because I've known them, that don't have that. So it's not per se that you get that. I think it can help, but I think you gotta have that inside of you in a way, you know, that sensitivity.